A specific genre of horror that I feel has been lacking for a while is the zombie genre. Zombies hold a special place in my heart. They were a crucial part in forming my love for horror growing up, from movies like Dawn of the Dead to shows like The Walking Dead, and even games like Call of Duty. Growing up in the 2000s, it was impossible to escape zombies, and I will forever be grateful I was able to experience all those pieces of media. But I have a problem. I've grown up, and I have also grown more and more desensitized to horror. But I don't feel that is entirely my own fault. Sure, I'm definitely not as scared as I was of these movies, but occasionally I'll revisit some of the older horror movies I watched, and I'm shocked at how they still affect me. Dawn of the Dead's intro is still incredibly effective and horrifying. The scene in 30 Days of Night when the vampires suddenly arrive and start slaughtering a whole town still gives me chills. And then it hit me. I figured out why most modern horror doesn't seem to be as effective. I know what it's missing: danger. And I don't mean just mindless violence or blood or anything like that. I'm talking about how when there is a dangerous threat in a movie, it feels like a threat. In the intro to Dawn of the Dead, our main character is scrambling to get out of the bathroom window because her husband and daughter are actively trying to eat her, and I feel that. In 30 Days of Night, the vampires show no mercy on this town because they know they are stronger and faster than any human. When the audience believes that the characters are actually in danger, that is when horror is its most effective for me. And this leads me back to my original point. This weekend, I went and saw 28 Years Later on opening night. If you're interested what I thought about it, I'll have a section at the end dedicated to my review. But watching it brought back a memory of what I consider to be maybe the scariest scene in horror movie history. Not from 28 Days Later, but the intro scene to 28 Weeks Later. And let me tell you why. But before I do, I have a quick announcement for you guys that I'm very excited about. If you live in LA and love crazy extreme horror like I do, I'm excited to announce my partnership with Sam Hell in putting on the first annual A Baroque Film Festival on November 22nd. Now, this is an event only for people 18 years and above, and we'll be showing 3 features, 4 short films, and Q&As with some of the filmmakers. There will also be vendors in the main lobby, so you can check those out in between films. Tickets go on sale soon, but it's limited to $99 at the moment. So mark your calendars if you live in LA, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. Now, with all that being said, I'm Nightmare Movies, and this is the scariest scene in movie history. The film starts in a quiet house, only lit by candle. In the kitchen, Dawn and Alice discuss what they should have for dinner, and this is also where we get some important exposition. Alice and Dawn had sent their children on a school trip presumably before the infection had begun. While Alice is worried, Dawn assures her that they are safe. All of this is set up for the rest of the film, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The importance of this is going to be more clear soon. The two share a kiss, and as they do, we are interrupted by the rest of our cast of characters. We get introduced to an elderly couple, Jeff and Sally, an older man, Jacob, and a young woman, Karen. They all sit together at the dinner table ready to eat, a generally happy atmosphere until Alice hands Karen her plate. Karen takes it and slides it to an empty chair right next to hers, and claiming that he'll be hungry when he gets back. This erupts an argument between her and Jacob. Karen's boyfriend Sam had run out about 5 days ago and has yet to return. Everyone at the table tries to quell the tension, but Jacob makes a good point. At this point, he's not coming back, and if he is, it's not going to be him anymore. It's just us in here and them out there. A knock at the door. Immediately, the audience is asking questions, just like the characters are. Who's the person knocking? Are they infected? Should you open the door?
Dawn, it's a kid!
It's a child. So immediately our characters have a choice to make, and because the intro has done such a good job setting up these characters, we know exactly where all of them stand on a situation like this. We know how much Alice misses her children, so she's likely to let him in, feeling that she can be the savior for someone else's child while someone else saves hers. Karen obviously wants to let the boy in, while Jacob obviously doesn't. It's Dawn who is on the fence, at first thinking logically about the situation. They don't know who's out there, or if the boy is infected or not. But Don, wanting to comfort his wife, succumbs to his emotional side. He takes down the barricade blocking the door, and the tension starts to rise. We still don't know who's out there. He was running from something. Don finally gets the door open, and luckily, it's just a child. He gets him inside and locks the door again. And I want you to remember how Don handled this situation for later, because it's going to be important in defining some of his actions. Everyone stands and watches the boy eat. They ask him questions like, "Where are you from? And how did you get here?" The boy explains that he's from Sanford, a town that Jeff explains is just a few miles away. He was running from his own mother and father and was able to make it here through the nearby woods. As the boy explains all this, Karen removes some of the cloth from the boarded up windows to see if he's been followed. Nothing in sight. That is, until... Before we really get into the rest of this scene, I want to explain why this has already been such an incredible introduction. Firstly, since minute 1, the film has been setting up just how dangerous this world is. People have to barricade themselves in houses, leaving no way for the zombies outside to see them. People that go outside are almost surely dead according to the characters. So we know that the characters believe there is danger, but how do we as the audience feel? Me personally, I'm on the edge of my seat. Seeing these bloodshot eyes peering through the crack and immediately being followed up by the infected breaking through the wooden barrier to grab Karen, it's shocking and effective. Now, I know the opinion of jump scares is that they are cheap and lazy, but I agree only when it's not followed up by something horrific, and I think 28 Weeks Later follows through with the promise of something horrific. Everyone in the house hears the commotion from the other room and goes to help Karen. The infected has her by the arm and takes a bite out of it. Jacob is able to free Karen, but this is where the danger is set in a different way. In your typical zombie film, when someone is bitten, it's a slow, painful process until they're turned. But in this world, the transition is almost instant, so anyone who is bitten is going to be an immediate threat. Karen lays on top of Jacob, opens her eyes, and they are blood red. She violently tries to attack him, and the shaky camera work only enhances the chaos ensuing right now. Dawn comes from behind them, hits Karen with a crowbar, solving only one of the many problems in front of them right now. And there is no break, no breathing room for these people. The infected are tearing through the wooden planks, and they are coming in the house fast. Everyone is sprinting through the house while Dawn tries to slow the flood of infected, but it's not going to be much help. Windows all over are being broken. The group are completely surrounded, trapped in this house. This is what danger feels like. The group is split up into two separate groups. Jacob, Sally, and Jeff in one corner of the house, and Dawn, Alice, and the boy in the other. Firstly, Jeff, Sally, and Jacob have locked themselves in a barn. Jacob is climbing up to a platform while Jeff holds the door shut. The infected are throwing themselves at the door, trying to break in, and Jeff is barely holding them off. He begs Sally to leave them and go with Jacob, but it's too late. The strength of all the infected is too much. They break down the door and dogpile Jeff, and Sally watches as he's being ripped apart. She grabs a hold of Jacob's hand, but the infected are too fast. A group of them grab her by the legs and drag her down from the ladder. Jacob shuts the trap door and escapes out of a nearby window, and the brutality of this scene hit me so hard. Jeff and Sally's death is truly tragic, and something I don't often see in apocalyptic media is characters that are elderly, and this is exactly why. It shows that there is no chance for anyone that isn't physically fit. They are nothing more than food. Now, on the other side of the house, Alice is searching for the boy upstairs in a bedroom. Don has gotten overwhelmed and is retreating upstairs, trying to save his wife. He's practically dragging her into the other room, but Alice spots the boy hiding in the bathroom. She breaks free to grab him, but as she does, the infected break down the door, and Don has a choice to make: save himself or potentially save his wife and the boy. Now, earlier, I mentioned that their choice to bring the boy in was important in defining Dawn as a character. Dawn's first reaction to the knocking at the door was to choose survival. Leave the door closed, abandon the child. So how does he handle this situation? By showing that he is a person guided by his survival instincts, not his morals. He shuts the door and his wife screams for him to help. Don opens a window, slides off of the roof, and makes a run for it. But in one last tragic moment, he turns around to see his wife in the bathroom window, begging him to help. But he can't do anything now. The infected break down the door, and the last thing that Dawn sees is his wife being dragged away into a horrible fate. One of the most horrific and tragic things I've ever seen in a film. There's a small bit of this scene left. Dawn is running through a field being chased by dozens of infected. He spots Jacob on a dock untying a boat for their escape. Dawn hops in, but when Jacob goes to jump, he slips on the edge of the boat, being stuck in a river full of infected. Dawn gets the boat started and narrowly escapes death. And in a moment of self-reflection, this is all he can say. This is a brilliant opening for a whole bunch of reasons. Firstly, it sets up our characters and all of their motivations in a quick and concise way. Even though they make what I would call mistakes, I can understand why they took those actions. Alice is missing her children and having the motherly instinct to potentially save someone else's. Don being torn between his own instincts and his family. Even Karen going to look through the window makes sense. She only peers for a minute, hoping that her boyfriend might have been in the same town and helped the boy get here. The other main reason I love this opening is because I have seen very few movies portray danger the way this does. I can't even remember how many times I've watched a horror movie and thought, wow, these characters are about to die, only to be saved in the last minute by another character or the writers suddenly deciding that whatever creature or killer that has been threatening the characters this whole movie suddenly isn't very good at killing things. I can get behind a certain level of plot armor because every story has it, but from the very first contact with the infected in this scene, they are shown to be merciless. They swiftly dispose of almost every character without hesitation. The only time that there is hesitation is when one of the infected has to choose between Dawn or Alice. And in that case, as I just said, it's choosing, and it only contemplates for a moment before continuing full force. I think writers tend to write these hyper-aggressive antagonistic forces to create stakes in their films. But then they write themselves into a corner, and the only way out is to essentially nerf your antagonist. Another creative example of doing danger correctly, coincidentally, comes from another zombie film that I absolutely love, called Wreck, or Record, depending on who you ask. In that film, the infected are shown to be hyper-aggressive and extremely contagious, just like in this movie, and they remain that way throughout. Once the number of infected goes up, the danger increases equally, and that's how it should be. Now, if you didn't know, Danny Boyle, the original director of 28 Days Later, did not return for 28 Weeks Later. However, he did direct this sequence, and this is what made me keep an eye on him as a filmmaker. Which brings us to 28 Years Later. Again, as I said earlier, I was able to see it opening night, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers for it, but I do have to talk about some aspects that are pretty closely related to the story, so this is your spoiler warning. Honestly, I liked it overall, but I was a little disappointed, partially due to my own expectations being too high, but also I had a hard time getting invested in the second half of this movie. I want to start out by saying that I absolutely loved the first 40 minutes of this film. Danny Boyle utilizes his cameras and editing in some of the most fun and creative ways that I think I've ever seen. I've never seen an $80 million movie take such huge creative swings. It's tense, it's engaging, it does have some iffy CGI idea, but that's pretty much my only complaint. It's an interesting story about a boy becoming a man too early and fighting to keep the humanity in him, and it's wonderful. However, after the first 40 minutes, it shifts from a survival story to more of a meditative one. Now, again, this is just my personal opinion, but I felt that the shift was a little too jarring. I appreciate what it was going for, and I did find parts of the relationship between the son and the mother to be both heartwarming and heartbreaking, but I think this came at the cost of some of the danger the infected pose in the story. Not that this needs to be a story solely about zombies or anything, because it's obvious Danny Boyle wanted to do something more with this, but my critique is that I had a hard time buying the way these characters would get out of certain situations. They do try and reinvigorate the feeling of danger through a really cool sequence with some Swedish Navy soldiers being wiped out by one specific infected that seems to be almost unstoppable. But as the film goes, it seems like that specific specific infected is never given that sort of treatment ever again. And as for the very, very controversial ending, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun and weird, but in the best way, and it was an interesting way to tie everything back to the opening. I know a lot of people really hate this ending, mostly because of its tone, but I thought it was a fun way to set us up for the sequel. I also did a little bit of research into the ending because I didn't quite understand it. Apparently it works a lot better culturally with those in the UK, and it has some horrifying implications if you look into a man named Jimmy Savile. This is entirely my own subjective opinion. I'm aware that 28 Days Later is often slow and meditative. It's honestly what I like about that film. But in that, I felt like it was more stripped back and concise, and I never felt like our characters were able to cheat their way out of a situation, except for maybe the bombastic ending or when Cillian Murphy's character escapes the soldiers. But in that, the infected are still very much a threat. To me, in moments, the theme takes precedent over the story in the second half of 28 Years Later, instead of the two working in tandem like in the first 40 minutes. I've seen some very heated discourse around this movie, from critics saying that this movie was boring and the characters were bad, but I don't entirely agree. I do like this film. I just had a hard time buying into some of the situations that our main characters were able to escape. I still think that everyone should go see 28 Years Later, but I want to give a warning that if you're expecting a straight up horror film, that isn't what you're going to get from this. There are some beautiful and tragic moments that I know a lot of people have enjoyed and that some people have not. This is an extremely divisive film, but I still think you should go check it out if you haven't already. If you have seen the movie, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. And if there are any other incredible openings in horror films that you love, let me know those as well. And with all that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Nightmare Movies, and I'll see you guys next time.